I'm not going to give you a history lesson about HTTP. You can look that up on Wikipedia. I will rather show you how it works. So let's get into it. So first of all, it's an application layer protocol. So if you look into the networking layers, on the bottom you have some kind of physical layer depending on what kind of network you're using, whether it's Wi-Fi or cable or whatever. And on the top usually we have Ethernet, and on that we have IP. Of course, everybody knows IP with IP address and everything. And on that we are running TCP. And on the top of all this, in the application layer, we are using HTTP. So HTTP consists from HTTP requests and responses. So for instance, we have our browser here, and we have our web server here. And when you load a page, the browser sends an HTTP request. And then the server does some kind of processing and replies with an HTTP response. By design, HTTP is a stateless protocol, which means that the server cannot decide from two requests whether they are related or not. If you would like to maintain some kind of state, you will have to transfer it in the contents of the HTTP request. So usually there is a cookie here or something similar. It's hard to read. The statelessness comes from the early age of the web, when only static websites existed. You requested a website from the server and it sent it to you. And that was all. Nothing really happened on the client side or on the server side. Basically, you requested an HTML file and the server sent back that file to you. But the websites were also pretty simple. There was no login or shopping cart or anything basically which needed session information or state information. Since then, the web got pretty far, and ways had to be figured out how to keep state information in a stateless protocol. So that's why cookies were invented and added to requests. So after my fabulous drawings, let's see all of this in practice. For that, let's go back to our Kali Linux and open your browser, but also make sure that your Burp Suite is running. And also that in your browser, you're using Burp as a proxy. So let's load example.com. We have seen it already when we set up the Burp Suite. So the page is loaded. Let's go to Burp. And then we can see here that there was one request sent. And here in the bottom, you see the request. And under the response tab, you see the response. So let's go through what are the elements of a request. So first of all, it starts with HTTP verb. In our case, this is a get, but it could be post or options or put, delete, or trace, or basically anything other, but these are the official HTTP verbs. It's up to the server what it does when it receives an HTTP verb, but basically the definition is that when you send a get, you're requesting data, and when you do like a post or put, then you are providing data to the server. Also, a very important difference is that GET request does not have a request body, but posts do. So if you look at here, these are the request headers, and then there is no request body. It's because in case of GET, you transfer any information what you want to send to the server in the URL. which will be here. Now we got to the second part. This is the path, what you request from the server. In this case, we are requesting the slash, which is usually translated to the main page, so the index.html or something similar. We can go back to the browser and request something else, like test. Yeah, probably nothing happens, but here we can say that we requested the path test. After that, there is the HTTP version. Nowadays, mostly it's 1.1. Some really old equipments and stuff like that use 1.0, and there is a new version on the way, but at the moment it's more or less always 1.1. After that, we start with the first header. If we click on headers here, it looks somewhat better, but I prefer to see the plain request. I didn't say it before, but what you see here is really the request. So this is the data which is sent through the wire. HTTP is a text-based protocol, so unless it's compressed, it's always plain text. So that's what I meant, that it's pretty easy to work with. So the second line is usually the host header, which basically just states the domain name of the host where you're sending the request. The host header can be important when the server hosts various domain names. For instance, my server hosts etherlab.net and GaryanSecurity.com, which was my old blog. The web server only knows from the host header which page are you requesting. So basically the IP address of these two domains are the same, but there are two websites running on. And the web server knows from the host header which websites you're requesting. Because of that, the host header is pretty essential. The rest of the header are not necessary for the request to be successful. They only contain additional information which can be useful for the server, such as like the user agent, which is like basically the browser. In many cases, that's how a server knows whether it talks with the browser or with a mobile browser or with a mobile app or something like that. Then in this case, the browser tells the server what kind of responses it accepts. So it accepts HTML or HTML and XML or XML. It also sends in information about the accepted languages and accepted encodings, so compression in this case. Let's get back to the first request. So this request tells the server that it would like to get the main page from example.com. And if we go to the response tab, then we see the HTTP response. Again, this is exactly what comes through the wire. These are the HTTP response headers. And after that, there is either content or not. In this case, there is. And basically, this is the content what is received by the browser, and it's going to be rendered by the browser. But let's start at the beginning. So again, the response states the version, the HTTP version, and there is a response status code, which is the 200 OK. Basically, when your request was successfully executed and responded, then most of the time you receive a 200 OK. There are various other codes, like the 300 something codes, which is usually some kind of redirect, or the 500 codes, which are usually internal errors, or for instance the other one which we see here is the well-known 404 file not found. But sometimes the server sends back 200 OK even if the request was unsuccessful. It really depends on the application and server what you're using, how that exactly works. But usually 200 OK means that the request was successful. Anything else means something else. The response also has headers, the rest here, which tells various information to the browser about how to handle this response. For instance, the content type header tells the browser or the client what kind of content it is, what's sent here in the body. If it's text HTML, then the browser knows that it's a simple HTML site and it can be rendered as HTML. It could be text XML, then the browser knows that it's an XML and it doesn't try to render it as HTML, but it just shows it as an XML. It could be also binary data, and then usually you get this download window because the browser cannot interpret the binary. But if it says that it's a JPEG, then the browser can show you a JPEG, so then it doesn't have to be downloaded to a file, it can be just shown in the browser. Then there are a bunch of other data for caching and stuff like that. Usually the server header is important for us in an assessment because it can tell you what kind of web server is in use or what's the technology stack. So it could say that it's an Apache or it's an IIS or something similar. And the content length just tells the client, the browser, how long is the content here, so that the browser knows what to expect. There are also various security headers which can be sent. We will talk about these later when we get to the security headers part. And in the body or in the content, you see HTML. This is the HTML code of this simple website. When the browser sees that the content type is text HTML, then it takes this content and renders it, and that's why it looks as it looks. This is the very basics of HTTP. We'll learn much more about it during this course, and there are endless resources on the internet. So never be afraid of Googling something you don't understand, because that's how you're gonna learn new stuff. So that's about HTTP. I will see you in the next section. So take care. Bye.